Today we're going to learn how to draft and sew a really cute little summer playsuit. As you can see in the image next to me right here, you can see the type of garment that we're going to be creating is going to be a really nice flared short, and then we're just going to put quite a simple top on with a cap sleeve. If we then look at the back, I thought it'd be nice to do a scooped back. So loads of lovely cute little details for us to get into today. We are going to be using our jersey blocks. We're going to be using both our top and our trousers in order to make this playsuit. If you've not drafted out and created your blocks for your stretch top and your stretch trousers, you can just refer back to some previous videos that I filmed showing you how to measure your body and then how to create your own stretchy blocks. So we're going to be using the top block and the stretchy trouser block today. So along with your two blocks, you're also going to need your standard pattern drafting tools listed here on the screen. You'll notice we've got our two blocks, and then we've also got some stretchy jersey fabric. Now, depending on the type of fabric you use, you may find that you need to tweak and change your pattern a little bit. You may need to add more ease or less. Now, the fabric that I'm using today is our Minerva exclusive fabric, which is a jersey viscose fabric. This pattern is the Orchard Spray fabric, and it's got a really light feel to it. The fabric has an 80% stretch widthways and approximately a 60% stretch lengthways. So it is super stretchy, and it's just going to sort of pull up over our body really nicely. For this type of pattern, because we're just going to pull it up and over our body, I'd probably recommend that the minimum stretch you have is around 30 to 40%, just in order to stretch around your body. You may find at home that you've got something that's going to work beautifully at less, and that's absolutely fine. Just don't forget that this is a bespoke journey that we're going on, so your fabric and your block both inform the fit. So you need to consider both those things as you follow along today. In today's video, I am wearing the Hughes dress by Friday Pattern Company, and this is in some of our gorgeous Minerva exclusive viscose chalet fabric. This is called Banana Hills, and it's a really cute print and I really like it. Okay, let's get straight on into pattern drafting. So we're going to start off by pattern drafting. We're then going to make all the alterations to our block that we need to. We're then going to grab a piece of tracing paper and create our pattern pieces by adding our seam allowance. And then finally, we're just going to sew that up pretty quickly together and have a look at our first trial to see what it looks like. Obviously, this is a good fun experiment, so see how we go, and probably at the end you may well find you want to make a couple of changes to fit you perfectly. That's totally normal. Let's go and have some fun. So on the table in front of me, I've got my front pattern piece, which is here, and this is my back pattern piece. So they are actually exactly the same. The only difference is that the front pattern piece has a lower neckline, you can see it there, can't you? And the back has a higher neckline. So just for the sake of clarity, back and front. Now I'm going to start with the back pattern piece, and I want to start by just drawing the scoop neck of the back of the pattern piece. Now what I've done is I've measured my nape to where my bra strap is at the back, because I want to be able to wear my bra with this top. So the distance between my nape and the top of my bra strap at the back is about 27 centimetres. So we know this is where our nape is here. So all I'm going to do is just to mark a point that is 27 centimetres along the centre back. And that just demonstrates the extent that I might want to drop my scoop back to. However, I think I'm going to raise it by 1 centimetre just to be on the safe side. That's how I've decided how low I want my scoop to be. Obviously, you can do the same process at home, or you can just have a little play and see what you prefer. Next, grab your ruler and just draw a line that's perpendicular to the centre back as a reference. Then at the top out here, I'm just going to widen the neck by 2 centimetres. Then just find a soft curve that you're happy with from those 2 points, joining them up together, making sure you hit a nice straight perpendicular line at that point there. Lovely. So we're going to cut out that excess next. At the front now, let's alter the neckline on the front. I'm just going to do a really simple scoop, but obviously I'm going to also just offset it by 2 centimetres from the top of the neck point here, because that's what we did for the back here. Just going to drop the neckline by 5 centimetres, keeping it reasonably high at that point, and then just find a nice soft curve again. And once you've found the curve, just remove that volume. Now, the next thing we want to do is to add those little cap sleeve finishes to the top of the pattern. I'm just going to extend the sleeve by 3 centimetres. That's all I'm going to do. Keep it really simple, just extend it out. And then I just want to find a little curve that brings it back into the arm side really nicely. Yeah, just something like that. And the same on the back. Okay, so we're not just dealing with a top because we want to create a full, like all-in-one playsuit. So effectively, what we want to do now is to cut the top at the waist, and then we're going to add the trousers in at the waist and join them together at the waist. So let's remove any volume from our top, from our waist down. Next, what I'm going to do is actually straighten off this waistline because I'm going to do some shearing and there to create volume. Then just using your ruler, I've lined it up with my arm side line up here, and I'm just going to draw a nice straight line down. And the same on the other side. And just remove that volume. Brilliant. The final thing we need to think about in terms of the top is how we're going to finish the garment. So on jersey, probably one of the easiest things to do is to create a neckband and put that around the neck, and also for the sleeve, just to do a tiny little cuff as well. So we'll draft those out together now before we move on to the trousers. I want my neckband to be 1.5 centimetres wide, which isn't actually that wide. So I'm just going to mark 1.5 centimetres offset around the curve of the front neckline and also the curve of the back. Once you've marked those neckband locations on, just remove that volume from the main piece. Okay, what we're going to do now is grab a new piece of paper and we're going to draw our new neckband. So first of all, we need to have a tape measure, and we're going to just measure the inside line of this bit here. So we're using a tape measure because it will kind of go around the curve of the neckband at this point here. Measure it a few times so that you're really confident of what it is. On mine, it's 18.5 centimetres. For you, obviously, it'll be something different. Now on the back, let's just repeat that process. So on the back for me it's 33 centimetres. So with our neckband, as always, we want to draft it to be a little bit smaller than the bodice because we want it to sort of cinch in and hold in really nicely. So we're actually going to reduce the volume, the length of the pattern pieces by 0.85 this time. Okay, so on the front pattern piece here, we've got 18.5 centimetres. So tap that into your calculator, then times that by 0.85. I'm getting 15.7. So I know that my neckband front, I'm going to write it here, is 15.7 centimetres. Now, the neckband back is going to be whatever your length is here. So tap that into your calculator. For me, it's 33 times 0.85 again, and I'm getting 28 centimetres for me. So next, what we want to do is to draw a line that is the length of those two combined. So 15.7 plus 28 gives me 43.7 centimetres. So I'm just going to mark a point that is 43.7 centimetres along this line. And then I'm just going to square up 3 centimetres. And then square back down to the bottom. So you've got a rectangle that is the length that you need it by 3 centimetres high. Now the next thing I want to know is, at this point, where's my shoulder point on the neckband? So for me, I'm then going to mark a point that is 15.7, so my front neckband location, away from this side here. So 15.7 is here. We can mark a little notch at that point. And just do the same for the bottom. And then I'd mark this front. Okay, and the front, we definitely want to make sure that this is place on fold here. So even though this is just the drafting pattern piece, I'm still going to put a little arrow there just to remind me when I come to actually create my pattern pieces and add my seam allowance that I want it to be folded at the front at that point, because I want the seam to be at the bottom at the back. Okay, the next thing we want to do is actually to do the sleeve here, and obviously this is a replica of this. So the first thing we're going to do to the sleeve is actually just mark off our 1.5 centimetre seam, 1.5 centimetre band, and just trim it off. Once you've done that for the front, just repeat that process for the back. Measure the length of one of the sleeves, just one side is fine. For me it's 22 centimetres. Then grab your calculator and tap that distance into your calculator. Times it by 2 because we've got the front and then the back, and they are actually exactly the same effectively. So we're just doubling them up. Remember, the block was exactly the same. Just times that by 0.95. I don't want there to be what I do want is it for just to sort of sit under slightly, but I don't want it to be cinched in. I don't want it to feel sort of tighter. I'm really happy with the arm side lines currently on my block. So we're just going to times by 0.5 just to give it a tiny little bit of pull in at that point. So whatever you've got there, that is the total length of your sleeve. So we can draw it onto this paper now. So just draw a line that is the length that you need it. For me, 41.8. And then we want it to be 3 centimetres tall because it's going to be doubled over. So we allowed for a 1.5 centimetre band, sleeve band. So if it's doubled over, it needs to be 3 centimetres deep. Okay, so in front of me here, I've got my back trouser leg and my front trouser leg of my jersey block. As mentioned at the beginning, if you've not done a jersey block, then you can obviously refer back to a previous video where I've shown you how to do that. So the very first thing we're going to do is actually join the two together at the hip, crotch and knee line down here. We've got a bit of a gap up here, and that's absolutely fine. What I want to do with these trousers is obviously cut them off to make them shorter, to make them a pair of shorts, and then I want to sort of flare them out to create loads of volume, so they almost look like a little skirt. They've just got loads of little volume in the shorts. So let's do that together. So to start off with, let's just add a little piece of paper into the waist here, because we are okay with creating a bit of a wider waist at this point because we're tying in with the extended and wider waistband of our top, aren't we? And of course we're going to shear the waistband in order to create the shaping that we need, so we're okay to widen it at the top as we need to. Next thing I want to do is to shorten the trousers. Obviously the length that you want to shorten your trousers to in order to create shorts is completely up to you. So for me, I'm just going to mark a point that is, my hemline is going to be 23 centimetres from my hip line. That's just a length that I know that I particularly like. Why don't you go and try on a pair of shorts that you like and just measure the distance from maybe from your waist down or from your hip down. Just ascertain the length of the trousers or lay them on top of your block, which is the easiest way to do it really, and then just mark where the hemline is. So for me, 23 centimetres below, so I'm just going to mark a series of points and then draw a nice straight line across the bottom of my block. Okay, let's cut off the bottom of those trousers completely. Measure the length of the hip line. For me, it is 46.5. We want to divide this into 7 equal parts. So then just divide it by 7 and then just mark a point that is that distance along and continue to offset the same distance. For me it's 6.6, just along that hip line consistently. So that you're going to then divide the hip into 7 equal parts. Then just square up and down. Next, cut along each of those lines, leaving a pivot point up at the waist. Lovely. Okay, so I've just moved that round, and all we want to do is just to open up all of these little lines just to give us a nice even distribution of volume between each of the bottom pieces down here. Obviously, how much volume you choose to add at this point will have a big impact on how flared your little trouser legs look, or how tight they look. So for me, I think it really is a design decision, and this is why toiling is really good at this point, because you can sort of give one thing a go and then say, actually, do you know what, I need to add more volume, or I want to take it out, it's too bulky. So it's completely up to you at home. Give it a go. I'm going to add 4 centimetres in between each one, just so we've got a nice bit of volume here and I can really show you the aesthetics of what we're trying to create here. So I've sellotaped this one down here. and that's definitely on. So I'm just going to offset this one and bring it so that at the bottom hem here, it's 4 centimeters distance between the two. Then moving on to this next one, just extend that out so that it's still nice and flat up at the top, but so it's 4 centimeters offset down at the bottom, and just stick that down in place. Repeat that process for the other sections. Okay, just like that, it's looking great. The final thing I'm going to do now is just add a little bit of extra volume to these points here. I'm just going to add half the amount that I added into this, so that's 2 centimeters extended to either side. So just extend the line by 2 centimeters. And then we really just want the line to be perpendicular, the line that we send up. So just send it up 2 centimeters like that. Obviously then we've got a bit of a junction at that point. So then I just soften it off using a nice curve on your ruler. Something like that. Then just remove the extra volume that you don't need. Brilliant. Now that we have made all the changes we need to our blocks, we're now actually going to create our pattern pieces by adding our seam allowances where necessary. So obviously we need a seam allowance where something is going to be attached to something else. So for us in this video, we're going to use a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance as standard. Let's start off with the top and then we'll move on to the short part of the playsuit next. Let's start off by looking at the back. So on the back, we're going to place the centre back on the fold. The seam allowance has been added around the perimeter. Grain line runs perpendicular to the waist, and we're just going to cut one on the fold. Just repeat that whole process for the front in exactly the same manner. So the front pattern piece is exactly the same as the back pattern piece. We're placing it on the fold, and we're just going to cut one. Now then, we're just going to add our seam allowances now to our neck band and to our sleeve. To our sleeve band, the seam allowance is just 1.5 around the entire perimeter of the rectangle. This is the playsuit, the sleeve band, and we're just going to cut 2 because we've got 2 sleeves. Okay, let's do the neck bands next. So the neck band here, we're just placing this bit on the fold. So we're just going to leave no seam allowance at that point, but the perimeter of the rest of the rectangle is going to have that 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So this is the playsuit neckband. We're just going to cut one on the fold, and then I'm also just going to add these 2 little notches here and here for the shoulder seam. Brilliant. Let's move on to add our seam allowances and create our pattern pieces for our short section of the playsuit. Moving on to the short pattern pieces, let's now add our seam allowances. We are going to add a seam allowance around the entire perimeter. Okay, so our grain line is just going to follow the side seam on this particular pattern piece. I'm also going to add a notch where my hip line is on the curve of the crotch here, and also on this side here. That will be a double one because it's the back. I'm also just going to do a little notch at the side of the side seam up here where that side seam would hit in there, because that's really going to help me because my bodice has got side seams, hasn't it, at that point, so it's just going to tie it up really nice and neatly. So this is our playsuit shorts pattern piece, and we're going to cut 2 of these. At the bottom I've just added a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, simply, well, it's a hem allowance really, I'm just going to overlock it and turn it under and finish it just pretty quickly like that because it is effectively just a 12. Brilliant. Okay, so we have done our pattern pieces. I'm now going to go and grab my fabric and cut it all out, and then let's sew it together and see what it looks like. We'll start off with just preparing our shorts. The first thing to do is just to pin and then sew the crotch curve of the front and the back together. So with the right sides together, place one over the other and just pin those 2 curves. I'm then going to sew using a stretch stitch on my machine, which is a lightning bolt stitch. You could use a narrow little zigzag stitch, or of course you could use a straight stitch, like a running stitch, with using Meriflex stretch thread, which also works really well. I'm going to sew it first, and then I'm going to finish using an overlocker. Jersey fabric obviously doesn't really fray, so an overlocker is optional, and it's up to you how you want to sew your jersey. Okay, once we've done that, we're then just going to open up the trousers, the shorts, and join them up at the inner leg seam down here. So just pin in place. Just make sure that you're joining up the centre seam of the crotch just really nicely and getting that as accurate as you can. I'm using pins here, but obviously you could use clips if you would prefer. And of course you can just sew all these seams using an overlocker if you prefer, just straight away rather than sewing it on your sewing machine first. I just personally think it gives you more of a robust finish to sew with your sewing machine first and then finish with your overlocker. If you're sewing with your overlocker, don't forget to trim off the seam allowance as you go. Brilliant. Okay, great. So look, we've got a little pair of shorts now. Let's work on the top pattern piece next. Okay, so we've got our front and then our back with the lower neckline. I'm just going to open up the front so the right side is facing up, and then just pop the back on top of it, right sides together. Pin the side seams, both of them, and the shoulder seams, and then we're just going to sew and finish those. Now, because we are making a playsuit out of this and the weight on the shoulders are going to have to carry the weight of all this fabric plus the weight of our big sort of skirt slash shorts at the bottom, what I would recommend is that we just reinforce the shoulder seam with a bit of elastic. You can just use ribbon if you'd prefer, that's absolutely fine. But all this does is it just sort of strengthens the seam up at the top up here. So as we're sewing it, I'm just going to cut a length that is the length of the shoulder seam, like that. And I'm just going to pin it in place where the stitch line is going to be, so it's going to be stitched in place. And I'm pinning it onto the back of the pattern piece rather than the front. And just repeat for the other side. Okay, let's sew all those seams now. Okay, lovely. So that's all done now. You can see the little bit of elastic here is attached on with 2 rows of stitches. So we've got the lightning bolt stitch and then also the overlocker stitch. That's a nice firm finish. It's not going to stretch too much out of place. Don't forget just to press your seams as you go. Okay, so next we've got our neckband and our sleeve bands, which are going to be prepped in exactly the same way. So with our neckband, it's already cut on the fold, so we're just going to pin and sew the short edge here. And then with the 2 sleeve pattern pieces, the sleeve bands, we are just going to fold them over so they create a continuous loop and then pin and sew those ends as well. So effectively what we're doing is just creating 3 lovely continuous loops. Okay. Let's sew those in place and then we will just press them open. Once you've pressed all those little seams open, the next thing we're going to do is just fold the whole band so that it is wrong sides together and creates this lovely continuous loop all the way around. Once we've done that, we're going to do that for all 3. We're just going to press that in place so it's all nicely prepped so that it can then be attached to the bodice. Okay, we're going to attach these 3 bands in the same way. The sleeve bands are going to go obviously on the sleeve and the neck is going to go around the neck. I'm going to demo the neck and then we're just going to repeat for the sleeves. So to start off with, what we want to do is we actually want to find and mark the centre front of the neckband. You can do that, if I pop it here, by lining up the 2 little notches which are there. And then just snip at this point here for the centre front. And we've got the notches for the sleeves and then we've got the centre back. Likewise, on the front here, we want to find where the centre front is. So fold the pattern piece in half, like that. And then just do a tiny little snip at the centre there. So you've got that marked, and also down at the bottom down here. Now our neckband is shorter than the circumference of the neckline, so we're expecting to have to stretch it. So first of all, line up the centre front notch of the neckband and the bodice together, and then do the shoulders, those are your next reference points with your little notches there, and do the other shoulder over here with the other little notch, line that up nicely. And then while we're working on the front, we may as well just stretch out the fabric slightly because the bodice is going to be longer, and just pin evenly, just evenly distribute the bodice around that neckline, that neckband. Just make sure that you're lining up all three of the raw edges really nicely and neatly. It's worth spending your time just getting this really nice and accurate, because this is going to be something that people are going to see quite a lot around the neckline. You might, for that reason, actually want to start this process with the sleeves, because people are going to see the sleeves quite in as much detail as they will be looking at the neckline when they're looking at your face. Brilliant. Once we've done the front and pinned all the way from the centre front all the way up to the shoulder seams, just flip it over and just repeat that process on the back. So line up the back of the pattern piece with the seam down there with the centre back notch, that in place. We haven't got any other notches to help us guide us around the curve of the neckline, so just stretch it out and ease it in place. Brilliant. Once that's all been pinned, we're then just going to sew that in place and then finish it using your preferred method. Lovely. So there we have our neckband completely sewn in. You may find that if this bit is popping up, like the seam allowance is popping up, you may just want to sew it down really neatly, so that you've got like a secondary line of stitches running on the bodice side of the neck, just holding that seam allowance down, which is like a nice little top stitch. You could do a little zigzag stitch there, or you could use twin needles to get a really nice finish. Okay, so the next thing to do is the sleeves. Repeat that whole process with the sleeves. Okay, so we've got our bodice here, and all I want to do is just find out where the centre front is down here. So I'm going to fold the garment in half, and then I'm just going to give it a little snip here for the centre front and centre back. The next thing I'm going to do is put this bodice inside the shorts with the right sides together, making sure the front of the bodice is touching the front of the shorts. So where that little centre front notch is, line that up with the shorts centre front seam. And then on the side seam, we can line up the notch with the side seam of the bodice. And then we should have a centre back notch as well, which we can line up with the back of the shorts with the seam there. And then the other side seam notch with the side seam of the bodice top. Great. Once you've got all of those pinned together, then you might just need to ease in your trousers and your top together, and then it's almost there, isn't it? It's always the same. But then we're just going to sew it using our standard seam allowance and finish using your preferred method. Wonderful. Okay, so our waist is now sewn. I'm going to press that down in a minute, but when I go to the ironing board, I'm also going to be hemming my short legs. That shape is looking really cute, isn't it? Fit and flared. Right, I've finished off the hem just by overlocking it, and all I'm going to do is turn it up by 1.5 centimetres, press that in place, and then I'm just going to top stitch it all the way around. So while I'm at the ironing board, I'm just going to turn that up and prep that for hemming. Oh wow, that's looking so cute. That's like exactly how I imagined it when I was drafting it earlier today. So it looks amazing. I'm really happy with that. We've now hemmed the bottom. We've sorted out all the top bits. And you could just pop the garment on and wear it like this. It'd be very loose and free-fitting and absolutely gorgeous. However, what I'm going to do to give it a bit of definition is I'm going to use some shearing elastic, and I'm actually just going to run one row of shearing around the waistband, just to give it a little bit of cinch in at the waist. But do go and try it on and see what you think. Okay, let's go see what that looks like. Here's our gorgeous little playsuit. The fabric is looking amazing. I love how comfortable it is with the sheared waist, and the back detail is just a really nice little surprise at the back when you turn around, isn't it? Really cute, really gorgeous, and in beautiful fabric. So thanks for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. We've had loads of fun pattern drafting our little playsuit today. I've shown you the concept of how to attach effectively your top to your trousers, and from there really you can just take it away however much you want to. Anyway, I hope that's really inspired you, and do come along and follow us next week as we continue our pattern drafting series.